Right, welcome everyone to our presentation on Iraq and the country strategic analysis on its energy sector. So for today, we're going to talk about the country's energy consumption, the energy production and trade. And in the last step, we will have a strategic analysis or energy SWOT analysis. To dive into the first chapter, we first present to you an energy consumption mix of all the different final sources that Iraq uses for its energy consumption. As you can see, oil has been the biggest final source of energy consumption since the beginning of this documentation, and is today with around 69% of overall final sources represented here. Over the last 70 years, the consumption based on oil has increased with a CAGR of 5.8%. So quite a strong growth every year on average. The second largest portion is gas source, with around half of what we see in oil. And there we even saw a larger increase over the last 70 years with 6.6%. And what is quite interesting is that we have a large increase of energy consumption from gas since 2006, growing with around 18% per year. So quite a catch up between gas and oil. Lastly, we also have the renewable sources, so especially solar, which hasn't been that large of a portion of the overall mix in energy consumption. It started in 2013, but it has remained below 1 terawatt hour constantly over the last 10 years. So what exactly does the country use this energy for? On the next page, we have a split and for the different sectors. As you can see, transport is by far the largest consumer of energy in the country with around 44%, followed by industry and residential, which both have a share of around 25%. So overall, we see that these three sectors make up almost 95% of energy consumption in the country, which is quite significant. To have an overview of the key metrics of the economy in general, we have put in some minor key metrics such as GDP, HDI, population, and so on. And just to give a quick overview, GDP is in Iraq's GDP is on place 6 in the MENA region, so Middle East and Northern Africa, directly behind Egypt and Iran. The HDI with 0.69%, however, is only on place 14 in MENA, so behind Libya and Lebanon. And with 44.5 million inhabitants, the country is one of MENA's most populated countries, with main industries, of course, oil. You've already seen it, and we'll also see it on the next slide. However, agriculture has also played an important role in the past. Yeah, so here on the next slide on energy production, we see overall that oil has been a stable first place over the last around 30 years. Of course, this graph or the oil production is impacted by different aspects such as world economy, oil prices, but also oil reserves, of course. Overall, it has increased around 1.4% annually over the last 30 years, so no real increase or no large increasements over this time. However, for gas, we see a similar kind of development over the last around 20 years. So since 2004, there has been a large increase of gas production in the country with around 19% annually. This can be partly could be caused by the regime fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003 and new elections in 2005, so the Iraqi general election, January 2005. So quite important development, which is also expected to further increase due to mainly driven by new foreign investments that we see in the country, with a planned growth of around 11% between 2023 and 2027. Solar energy again, as well as wind energy, quite small, also in production since 2013, but always below 1 terawatt per hour, so quite marginal. Yeah, we'll now go on to the electricity production mix.
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Nicolas. So yeah, now let me introduce you to the electricity production mix of Iraq. So when looking at the graph in absolute terms, electricity production has more than tripled since the 1990s and nearly doubled since 2010, with a total production of 82.5 terawatt hours in 2020, with a slight observed drop in 2021. So unsurprisingly, it overwhelmingly relies on the burning of fossil fuels, as Iraq is historically so a member of OPEP and the fourth crude oil exporter in the world. So oil and natural gas are the two main sources of electricity in Iraq, accounting both for 36 and 57%, which in total is 93% for the year 2021. And so a switch between oil and NGL can be observed in 2020, and notably due to higher efficiencies of NGL power plants. Surprisingly, no coal is used for the electricity production in Iraq, and that is also something that we can observe for Saudi Arabia in the same region. Since the 1990s, Iraq has had functioning hydropower plants, which still accounts for nearly all the remaining electricity produced, with 6% of the total production. And as for solar power generation, so as Nicolas told you, it has started only in around 2015 with 57 gigawatt hour installed, which is neglectable for the total production of electricity in Iraq, and new capacities have not been installed yet. So now, to understand this energy and electricity production mix, let's have a look at the map of so firstly the main oil infrastructures in the country. So Iraq produces 4,149 barrels of crude oil per day, and its main oil infrastructures are located on the east part of Iraq. It is composed of a complex and holistic web of both heavy extraction fields, the major one being West Qurna 2, refineries and pipelines that are leading to storage sites, and notably storage sites south in Qasr, which is a port opening at the Persian Gulf. There are also natural gas extraction fields, and their processing plants are located just next to them, in particular on the west part, northeast, and south of Iraq. And as for the power plants infrastructure, so there are 14 natural gas power plants of over 500 megawatts, 6 major oil power plants over 300 megawatts, and another 5 combined power plants over 500 megawatts. So we talked about hydroelectricity, and so 4 dams are used in the country. The most notable one being the Mosul Dam at the very north of the country, with 812 megawatt installed. Its national grid follows the oil and gas pipeline infrastructures from Mosul to Qasr in the south. And so yeah, finally, about its imports and exports. So due to its dense web of oil infrastructures, Iraq is exporting the equivalent of 1,965 terawatts of crude oil in 2021. Yet, although it produces natural gas, it still relies on imports for its national consumption of NGL, with 103 terawatt hour reported in 2021. And finally, it is important to notice that Iraq is dependent for its electricity consumptions, as it imports the equivalent of half of its local electricity production. So I will now leave the floor to Emma.
Okay, so now looking at how much CO2 was produced in Iraq annually, we can see from the graph that there has been a lot of fluctuation over the years from 1970 to 2022. However, overall, there has been an increase in emissions. In 1970, the CO2 emissions of Iraq were 23.88 million tons. However, as of 2022, it is 179.08 million tons. Looking at Iraq's annual emission figures is useful. However, it is also important to note that in 2022, the country's share of global CO2 emissions was 0.48%, and they had a 4.0 ton per capita CO2 emissions, which gives us just a bit more context of Iraq's CO2 emissions on a global scale. Then the next chart shows, on the next page, shows the CO2 emissions by source of energy that is used in Iraq. So from it, you can see that the majority of Iraq's CO2 emissions in 2022 came from oil, accounting for approximately 56%, with a total of 100.99 million tons. And then the second largest was natural gas, accounting for approximately 19%, with 34.30 million tons. Then moving on, we also looked at the future major energy products of Iraq. In July 2003, Total Energies finalized the Gas Growth Integrated Project, which is a $27 million agreement focusing on Iraq's natural resources and enhancing the country's electricity supply. It includes the development of infrastructure to capture flared gas from Basra oil fields for use in power generation plants. It also plans to up oil production capacity at Basra field to 120,000 barrels per day in 2 years, and then to 210,000 barrels per day within 4 years. It also involves the establishment of a seawater treatment facility to deliver water injections to pressure maintenance, aiming to boost oil production as an environmentally friendly alternative to utilizing fresh water. And finally, it involves the collaboration with Saudi Arabia ACWA Power to develop a 1 billion watt solar power plant contributing to the electricity supply. Altogether, this will address Iraq's climate goals, reducing their dependency on unreliable energy and improving essential services for its people. And then finally, we took a look at Iraq's overall energy situation using a SWOT analysis. The country's strengths include its abundant oil reserves, its potential for renewable energy, and its geopolitical importance. However, its weaknesses are its dependency on oil, its infrastructure challenges, particularly in electricity generation and distribution, and the country's ongoing political instability and security concerns. Its opportunities, on the other hand, include investing in renewable energy development, which allows Iraq to diversify its energy mix. There are also opportunities for the country to strengthen international collaborations and implement energy policy and government reforms. And then lastly, Iraq's threats are its geopolitical instability, its environmental impact that comes from oil extraction and production, and the economic challenges the country faces, such as corruption and mismanagement. So that's everything from us. Thanks.